What if I told you Britain was being pulled back into the European Union without a single vote cast in Parliament? This isn't fiction. This is a real political earthquake shaking the very foundations of our democracy. Before we dive into the full story, did you know that over 95% of our viewers aren't subscribed? We get it, life gets busy. But hitting that subscribe button is free, and it helps us keep producing the content you rely on. Support the truth. Subscribe now. Britain has been shaken to its political core by a Supreme Court ruling that may go down as one of the most seismic legal decisions in modern British history. The verdict delivers a punishing blow to Labour leader Keir Starmer, revealing a covert plan to quietly bring UK law into alignment with European Union regulations, all without the consent of Parliament or the British public. While Starmer maintained a public narrative of moderation, economic realism, and diplomatic pragmatism, the court found a drastically different story beneath the surface. Secret documents and backdoor agreements unearthed in court showed his government had already started integrating EU-style frameworks into UK law without any parliamentary scrutiny. These weren't minor adjustments, but significant legal shifts aimed at synchronizing British regulations with EU policies. Legal observers called the judgment devastating, describing the plan as a flagrant betrayal of democratic norms and a constitutional overreach. In its scathing opinion, the Supreme Court declared that Starmer's reliance on executive authority constituted a serious abuse of power. The court ruled that any major change to national sovereignty must first be debated and approved by Parliament, not executed in secret. It was a resounding condemnation, accusing the Labour leadership of acting unlawfully and undermining the will of the people. Coming from a leader who had campaigned on transparency and democratic accountability, the fallout is being called a political catastrophe. The case, brought forward by constitutional watchdogs and backed by pro-Brexit legal coalitions, successfully exposed what many are now calling a shadow rejoin scheme. The court's ruling confirmed that Starmer's administration had violated post-Brexit statutes and disrespected the outcome of the 2016 referendum. The backlash was swift, with opponents accusing the Labour leadership of attempting to undo Brexit through regulatory stealth. In the wake of the ruling, Starmer faces not only a legal defeat but a full-blown crisis of trust, threatening to unravel his leadership and reshape Britain's political future. The political fallout was immediate and brutal. Nigel Farage called the Supreme Court decision a defining moment for British democracy, accusing Keir Starmer of betraying the British public and demanding his resignation. Reform UK echoed the sentiment, condemning Labour for bypassing the electorate through covert actions and manipulation. The Conservatives, despite their own contentious Brexit past, seized the opportunity, with a senior Tory MP branding Starmer a rogue operator in a lawyer's costume, accusing him of treating constitutional boundaries as mere obstacles to sidestep. The most damaging reaction, however, came from inside Labour itself. Party headquarters reportedly descended into chaos as the implications of the ruling circulated. Internal leaks triggered waves of speculation about Starmer's leadership, exposing deep fractures within the party. Reports suggest even members of the shadow cabinet were unaware of the full extent of the EU alignment strategy. Many had been handed tightly worded briefings focused on improving European cooperation, but were not told that provisional deals had been signed or that legislation was already being drafted to align UK laws with EU standards. MPs representing Brexit-supporting constituencies reacted with fury. One backbencher slammed the operation as political suicide, while another described it as a betrayal of the highest order. Several MPs alleged they had been deliberately kept uninformed to avoid internal dissent. Labour's press team rushed to spin the court ruling as a legal clarification rather than an outright condemnation, but that narrative quickly fell apart. Legal scholars emphasized the ruling's language, pointing out that the judgment wasn't about technical missteps, it was a sweeping denunciation of how power had been used. The decision has ignited calls across Parliament for a comprehensive inquiry into the clandestine EU alignment efforts. Conservative MPs are now demanding full disclosure of communications between Starmer's office and EU officials. Others are pushing for select committees to question shadow ministers under oath. One MP even proposed a no-confidence vote, not necessarily to unseat Starmer immediately, but to force Labour into publicly defending a policy now declared unlawful by the nation's highest court. The irony is acute. Starmer, who rose to prominence pledging legal rigor, transparency, and democratic values, now stands accused of undermining every principle he claimed to uphold. At the same time, investigative journalists are digging deeper, probing key questions. When did these secret discussions with the EU begin? Who approved them? And how far into Labour's senior leadership did this covert policy extend? Names of senior advisers with long-standing EU ties and a clear ideological opposition to Brexit have begun to surface, adding fuel to an already explosive situation. What began as a legal issue has spiraled into a political scandal with the potential to reshape Britain's political trajectory. Keir Starmer, once viewed as a stabilising figure, now faces the most intense leadership crisis of his tenure. The legal judgment may have been final, but the political consequences are just beginning. The court's condemnation of Starmer's secret EU alignment plan triggered a legitimacy crisis that has rattled the Labour Party to its core. Infighting and blame have engulfed Labour's top ranks. Starmer, once heralded as the technocrat who would restore trust in politics, is now accused of wielding executive powers to stealthily reintegrate Britain into EU systems, bypassing Parliament, silencing public debate, and ignoring the Brexit vote. Leaks have intensified the scandal. Confidential strategy documents and internal memos have begun circulating in media and opposition networks, further incriminating the leadership. One leaked file titled Confidential Strategy Roadmap outlined a plan to re-establish EU regulatory convergence disguised as trade cooperation. The document suggested avoiding formal legislation, reducing parliamentary scrutiny, and minimizing media exposure to prevent backlash. The initials of key advisers appeared throughout the text, directly tying Starmer's inner circle to the plan. These revelations confirmed critics' worst fears. This wasn't accidental, it was an orchestrated effort to bypass democratic mechanisms. Labour MPs, especially those from Brexit-supporting constituencies, were furious. Emergency meetings erupted, and multiple front benchers threatened resignation unless full transparency was provided. One senior MP described the mood as volcanic, while another warned bluntly, "We told voters we'd respect Brexit. Now it looks like we've lied." Deputy Leader Angela Rayner reportedly issued a stark warning: "This could cost us the general election." In a heated private meeting, she demanded answers from Starmer, questioning how such a massive policy operation advanced without proper oversight. Although her public statements remained cautious, sources suggest Rayner felt blindsided and deeply frustrated. She allegedly viewed the EU plan as a Blair-style overreach that damaged her credibility among Labour's working-class supporters. The growing rift between Labour's technocratic leadership and its grassroots base has become a serious threat. Rayner now faces a critical choice: stand by Starmer and endure the political fallout, or step back to preserve her leadership future. External pressure has also escalated. Nigel Farage, speaking on GB News and online platforms, claimed the ruling exposed the establishment's intent to return the UK to Brussels control. Reform UK immediately launched aggressive ad campaigns framing Starmer as a Brexit traitor. Conservatives intensified their attacks, portraying Labour as untrustworthy and undemocratic. Legal experts underscored the ruling's constitutional weight, reinforcing the principle that no Prime Minister can pursue major international realignments, particularly those involving sovereignty, without Parliament's explicit approval. The judgment not only dismantled Starmer's EU strategy but also set a precedent to prevent future leaders from bypassing democratic accountability, while delivering a humiliating blow to Labour's leadership. The scandal only intensified as whistleblowers stepped forward. A former Labour advisor described a culture of paranoia and secrecy, obsessed with controlling optics and terrified of exposure. Staff were reportedly instructed to use coded language when referencing EU reintegration, deliberately obscuring details from both Parliament and the public. They were told to leave no paper trail, ensuring that sensitive plans would never be documented. Internal warnings that voters would reject any return to EU norms were dismissed. Public consultation, insiders revealed, wasn't seen as a democratic necessity, it was viewed as a dangerous risk to be avoided at all costs. As the general election looms, Labour's once unstoppable momentum has hit a wall. What was meant to be Starmer's moment of triumph now threatens to become his political ruin. The man who built his image as a cautious, principled leader is being recast as the architect of a constitutional deception. Journalists have filed freedom of information requests demanding access to secret communications with EU officials. Speculation is mounting that further damaging leaks may soon emerge from inside Starmer's own team. Each press conference becomes a minefield, every public appearance dominated by one burning question: can Keir Starmer still be trusted? This is no longer about policy, it's about principle. It's about democracy. And it's about power. Inside Number 10, efforts to contain the chaos are collapsing. Labour backbenchers are already organising behind the scenes, openly discussing leadership challenges. Names like Wes Streeting, Lisa Nandy, and Deputy Leader Angela Rayner are circulating. Rayner, reportedly furious over being kept in the dark, is weighing whether to distance herself before it's too late. Meanwhile, investigative journalists uncovered even more damning evidence: secret meetings with EU officials held not in government offices, but in discreet hotels and embassies. There, Labour strategists allegedly negotiated behind closed doors, discussing the UK's potential re-entry into EU regulatory frameworks, under misleading titles like Strategic Observer. The plan was designed to avoid public scrutiny and sidestep political accountability. This wasn't a slip-up. It was a coordinated operation, one involving civil servants, EU legal specialists, and senior advisors. Starmer eventually appeared in a hastily arranged press conference, reading from a scripted denial. He refused to answer questions, fueling further outrage. Social media erupted. One viral comment captured the public sentiment: he lied. He got caught. He's still pretending nothing happened. Labour's poll numbers collapsed overnight. Reform UK surged. Nigel Farage launched a nationwide campaign accusing the establishment of plotting to quietly rejoin the EU. Petitions soared. Donations flooded in. Inside Labour HQ, panic took hold. Staff deleted files, reviewed liabilities, and drafted resignations. Even Starmer's allies began to falter. The Guardian issued a cautious but critical editorial. Trade unions called for investigations. Momentum accused him of democratic betrayal. Reports emerged of Starmer becoming visibly shaken, paranoid, isolated, and increasingly defensive. The scandal has shifted from a legal defeat to a political firestorm. It's no longer a question of whether Starmer will survive the damage, but whether he'll survive at all. And as Britain watches this political drama unfold, one thing is clear: what began as a covert policy operation may now trigger the most explosive leadership collapse in modern British history. Want the full truth behind the headlines? Hit subscribe and join us as this political earthquake continues to shake Westminster to its core.